love seeing the Bible come to life. I love seeing the Book of Mormon come to life. But my thought has always been this: if you like the video, go read the book. You'll love it.
People are drawn in by hope. And I feel like as long as you show hope that's real and authentic, then the right people will find you.
So meaningful is because it starts with our team member, our employee, sacrificing something.
Hello and welcome to Latter-day Profiles. We're here at the LDS Motion Picture Studio in Provo, Utah. And joining me today is Brooke Romney. Brooke, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, so good to have you. People find Brooke Romney. Brooke Romney writes. You've got a blog. You've written for numerous publications, Washington Post, the Deseret News, regular publications there. 2 books, 52 Manners for Teens, 1 and 2. The 2 just recently came out, so check that out. We used the 52, the first one, with our kids at Family Home Evening. So when we're wrangling them around to try and listen.
Perfect.
And then also a new book, I Like Me Anyway, that's come out recently and we want to talk about as well. So Brooke, just good to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your background. How did you get into writing? I know as I read a little bit about you, you were an avid reader growing up. Did that lead into I want to write as well?
Yeah, I think when I was a kid, I loved to read and then I started to write. It's funny, I never really pictured myself as a writer. I actually thought I would be an attorney.
Oh, yeah.
Quickly, I learned that that wasn't nearly as fun as writing. And so I just started dabbling in it. I started writing. I wrote for a newspaper when we lived in Arizona. I did some press I worked for a congressman in Washington, D.C. And I started to realize the power of the written word and how much words could change someone's opinion or open their mind. And I loved being a part of that. I didn't necessarily think I was excellent at it, but as I did it more and more, I got more comfortable. Then when blogs kind of came onto the scene, we lived in Michigan. And I thought it was so incredible. All these women from Utah were talking about all the fun things to do with their kids. And there I was in Michigan without anything fun to do with my kids. And I thought, where's the blog to tell me where to go and what's family friendly? And so I started doing that myself, just in our small area. We lived in Ann Arbor. And it was a really fun thing. I got to learn about, the plays that were going on and the fun parks and wanted to share that with people. And then when we moved to Utah, and there were lots of people already doing that and doing it really well. And so I thought maybe my personal writing days were over. And one day I had a thought about a parenting idea that I wanted to share. And so I wrote it, but it was very personal. And I thought, I don't know if I can share something so personal online. That felt really scary to me. And it was much easier to talk about a restaurant to go to or a park to visit.
Right.
And so I started writing about it, and it sat in my draft folder on my blog for probably a month as I got the courage to share this. And when I hit publish, it was actually within 2 days the most popular post I'd ever done.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden I thought, wait, people might want to know a little bit about how I feel about parenting and some things that I had learned. Not too long after that, Instagram became really popular. And Deseret News picked up that first article that I wrote that I was so scared about. They picked it up, and I started to have some more opportunities to write. And as I started writing more and more often, more ideas kept coming to me. And that was really fun to be able to express those and share them in a way that started resonating with moms and women. And so those were kind of the beginning days and kind of went from there.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because, I attended BYU. Were you thinking about law at that point? I mean, what were you thinking you were going to do?
So I graduated in English, and I was kind of like, what do you do with an English degree? I didn't really want to be like a technical writer. That didn't sound really exciting to me. My dad's an attorney. And so I talked a little bit to the BYU Law School, but then my husband was finished. And so I thought, okay, like maybe let's just give something new a shot, because he had a job offer out in Washington, D.C. And I didn't have a job offer. And so I just started looking at things I could apply to. And I thought it might be kind of fun to work on Capitol Hill. And actually, crazy enough, my first interview was on September 11th.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't able to go in, obviously. I was getting ready for the day, and I had the Today Show in the background, and I watched the Twin Towers fall.
Oh, wow.
And I called down to Capitol Hill and just said, what am I supposed to do? And they said, just hold tight. And then they attacked the Pentagon. And so they got in touch with me 2 weeks later. And I was able to go out there, and I had a really exciting time in Washington, D.C. We had September 11th, the anthrax
Oh, yeah.
scandal at the Capitol, and then also the DC shooter. So that was a really, coming from my little Utah town to DC, that was very different. I had some really great experiences there. But then after I started on that path, I realized that maybe law school wasn't for me. I had a baby about 3 years later.
So started a family. This seemed like something when you first started, obviously at first is more like kind of, I guess, hobbyish kind of thing.
Yeah.
At what point did it take off? Was it the first article that got picked up when you think, hey, maybe there's more to this than just, doing it for fun, I guess?
Well, in Arizona, I had a really cool opportunity to work for the Arizona Republic, which is a newspaper. And I had this interesting experience where a friend was working for them and she was writing a mom's column. And she said, I don't want to do this anymore. Would you like to do it? And I felt very underqualified.
Sure.
I didn't think there was any way. I'd never written for anybody that was important or that very many people would read. And so I went into the interview thinking it probably wouldn't happen, and they took a chance on me. And so I started writing weekly. And I think it's really important, if you want to be good at something, to do it often.
Yeah.
And so that weekly writing, and then I had magazines contact me in Arizona that said, would you write a column for us? And would you try this with us? So I just kept saying yes to opportunities. And so that was really helpful as I started getting better at it. And then when we moved from Arizona and I was no longer able to write for the newspaper, I looked for other opportunities in Michigan. And when none opened up, I created my own and started writing really regularly. So I think it was that regular writing that helped me kind of hone my skills. For a while, I thought there was no way I could do anything more than write an article. That's what I wanted to do. And then when Instagram came, you can't write an article on Instagram. And for a while, people were, using Facebook and following links from Instagram. But when I realized that in order to stay relevant, I needed to figure out how to condense my thoughts into those 2,000 characters and put it all on social media. I would say that's when my writing really improved because, if you can say something in 700 words that it takes somebody else to say in 1,500, you can really drill down to what's most important. That was a great writing exercise for me.
Wow, that's tough. What did you figure out for your schedule? So now you're raising a family and you're doing writing. So mornings, evenings, when would you get your writing? I imagine you would draw on a lot of life experiences with those articles as well.
Absolutely. The schedule is still probably my hardest thing because as you're trying to, be a mom, be involved in your community, do the things that make you happy, but also run a full-time business. Those are always difficult. In the beginning, it was a lot of really late nights. So in Michigan, a hard thing and a gift was that my husband traveled Monday through Thursday. So that was why I really got involved in a blog, was because he was gone and I'm like, I can only watch so many hours of TV, And so I started working on something that I felt was building, my skills, but also something that I really loved and maybe would benefit others. And so I started doing that a lot. And that would go from the time the kids went to bed until I was ready to fall asleep. And then a lot of times during naps and then late at night. Today I have all kids in school, which has been a huge gift. So I work hard while they're gone. But then there's still some nights that creep in there too. So,
you're working with this. When did you, start to notice more of a following on your Instagram, on your, on your blog? Obviously, there's always the overnight sensation, but there's usually like 5 years leads to the overnight sensation. But how long did it take to build up that following?
Yeah, at least 5 years. I was writing pretty regularly. Probably, I think I started my Instagram in 2015. And I would say in about 2019, 2020, it started to gain a little. I always had followers and people that enjoyed what I was writing, but I would say the traction happened when I started really talking about teens.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think families were really hungry for that information. And as I was willing to share some of the things we'd done wrong, done right, lessons we'd learned, I think that was a place that people started to come to because there's not a lot out there on social media about raising teens. I started a little thing called Teen Talk Tuesday. And that brought a lot of people to my page. It just gave ways to talk about current events with your teens so that you weren't always just constantly asking, so how was your day? And they would say, fine. And what did you do? Nothing. Different ways to open up conversation. And one of the things that has always really propelled me is helping people figure out how to connect. And I think when we feel connected to our kids, to the people in our lives, we can live a much more successful life. We can talk about hard things. We can give feedback. We can celebrate with each other. We can really know each other. So I've always really focused on connection, teaching parents how to connect, with their teens, especially, is something. And I think as soon as I started really focusing more on teens, that was a space where there was a real need.
How did you get over the fear and trepidation of, one, opening up your personal life to others, but then also, this is your writing, that's scary, but then also other people are experts and you're sharing your ideas. How do you navigate that? Because I think a lot of us are a little nervous about that, but at the same time, you have great information to share.
Yeah, that's actually another big challenge. The first question you asked, so sharing your personal life, I had a really great gift in having 3 boys in 3.5 years. So I had 3 teens at the same time.
You got lots of experience.
So it didn't have to be quite so personal. Yeah. I could say, this was a situation. As my following grew, I also had a lot of people that would write to me about their issues and their problems. And so instead of always talking about what was going on in my own family, I could talk about what was going on in other people's families and offer some help and hope and advice for that. When it comes to kind of that worry about people not liking what you're saying, that was hard. That was hard. That was one of the reasons why that article sat for a month.
Yeah.
It's easy for somebody to say, like, I didn't really like that restaurant, but it's much more difficult for someone to hear somebody say, I don't think you're a good parent, or you don't know what you're talking about. But I have grown much thicker skin than I had 10 years ago, which has been a huge blessing. And when I feel like I'm sharing what God would like me to share and things that are in harmony with my values and goals and the principles of the gospel, I can have confidence that it's okay if everybody doesn't like it, but that other people need it. And most of the things I share, there's a lot of really good feedback of, this is an answer to a prayer. This is what is going on in my family. Thank you for helping me have a new perspective. And so I try to focus more on the positive than the people that say, you don't know what you're talking about.
And that's so hard because it only takes one negative to outweigh 50 positives, right? So somehow to balance it out and say, okay, it's okay. Not everyone's going to like me, kind of thing.
Well, and with my book, I Like Me Anyway, it's really interesting. So I had a lot of great reviews on Amazon. And then I had one really horrible and mean review. And it's interesting, when I told my husband, he said, wait, how many positive reviews do you have? How many 5 stars? And you're just going to focus on that one-star review, and you're going to put all your energy into that 1-star review from someone you don't know, from someone you don't even know if they read the book. You can review a book on Amazon you've never read, you know. But the interesting thing that I found is that review is also the most popular review. So when you are willing to put yourself out into the world, you have to be okay with the fact that it's not always going to be for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the 52 ideas. What is it?
Yeah, 52 modern manners for today's teens. Yeah.
Okay, so how did that idea come about? Because it's been very helpful. I was telling you before, we use that for our family meeting with our kids, and it's really, we really have enjoyed it. It has some great information.
Oh, that makes me so happy. So it came about because I had a teenager, and I kept thinking, how do you not know all these things? You've grown up in our home. I feel like we've been modeling how to, say the right thing and do the right thing. And I'm watching my teenagers and thinking, how is this not sinking in? So I remember going to Amazon and searching like social norms for teenagers or manners for teens, things every teen should know. And nothing was coming up. And I felt really frustrated. There were a few like manners, but it's about like how to use your fork. And while that is nice, that is not what I was that concerned about. And so I also realized that when I would correct my kids or try to share something with them, they would get really offended. They would think I was rude. They would think I was hard on them. And they would also think that I had no idea what I was talking about. And so as I was thinking about this concept, that was a little earlier. And then probably about a year later, I was noticing some things with my teenagers' friends. And like we would entertain them at our home, and they would be in the basement, and they would walk upstairs and leave, and we would be sitting right there, and they wouldn't say a word. And I thought, okay, maybe it's not just my teenagers that don't get all these things that they're supposed to understand. So I put just 3 things out on my Instagram of 3 things I wish teenagers knew. And it got an overwhelming response of, yes, oh my word, thank you for helping me figure out how to teach this to my kid. I bet my kid's somebody who doesn't say goodbye to the parents in the home and all these things. And then they said, please, like, keep doing this. Tell us more things. And so I started publishing one a week on my Instagram. And they were really popular posts and shared all over the place because it was good to know that my teens weren't the only ones that weren't figuring things out.
It's nice to have some company.
It really is sometimes nice to have some company. And the tips were also really, really helpful. And my motivation behind it was not just so that parents had nice kids. My motivation was because when teens do things successfully, there's a positive feedback loop. And when you're the teen that pitches in, people notice.
Yeah.
And adults are saying like, wow, thank you so much for staying after and putting those chairs away. And they are telling the parents like, your kid is so helpful. Like, thanks so much for having them, figure out how to help us. And all of a sudden, these teens who have really poor self-esteem, and it's hard to be a teen, and I believe that 100%.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, instead of getting negative feedback, they're getting positive feedback. And so instead of leaving an event and being like, that was lame, I'm lame, nobody likes me, they're like, I just walked away like feeling really good about myself because I just pitched in and everyone noticed. And when we do good things and people talk about the good things we do, you're more motivated to do more good things.
Yeah.
And so my biggest motivation, I want to help parents, but more than anything, I want to help teens feel successful and know how to be successful because I believe that our kids want to, they just don't always have the tools. And so as I was thinking about this book, I thought, okay, I have a tough crowd at my house. They're not easily impressed. And so I thought, how could I make this work for my family? It has to be short. It has to be impactful. It has to be doable. And there has to be a why. Like all of those things were really important. And then it has to not always come from me. And so I'm sure but like it stands up on like this. So if there's a parent with a kid who's not going to listen to him no matter what, they can read this on their own. And they still have the chance to be successful without their parents bugging them all the time about, why aren't you doing this? Try this, do this. So that is how this book came about. And it has blessed the lives of a lot of homes.
One of the things I was thinking about as you were saying that is that, sometimes it's like, why don't you get it? But I think, well, maybe I haven't been intentional. Maybe I just assume they're going to understand that's what you do, but clearly not, right? So you pretty much need to spell it out in short, sweet, and kind terms, I think, to know what's expected.
And I have, one kid especially needs to know the why behind it. So that was really important. Like on the back, it gives the why. So I'm not just saying, I like it when people don't share hurtful things. It's when you don't, like, if you are a person who shares hurtful things, your friendships are going to be affected. And you want friends. Yeah. You want people to like you. So it's really been great to be able to help change the homes, absolutely for the parents, but even more for the kids.
Have any personal favorites, ones that have got more attention than others of the tips that you've shared?
Well, one that always gets a lot of attention is find new friends. And that one, I've had some really beautiful experiences with people telling me that as they shared that tip, and just, to summarize it, it basically says, if people are always leaving you out, making you feel bad about yourself, find new friends. Yeah. It might be hard. You might have to be alone. You might have to make some effort, but there are people out there who like you and who will like you for you. And there's just been some really tender moments in families when a parent has shared this and later one of their kids comes to them and says, like, I got to find new friends. Like, these people are making me not like myself. They hurt my feelings all the time. And just the opportunity to open conversations like that in a home, because sometimes as a parent, you saying all the time, how come your friends didn't call you? Why aren't you doing anything tonight? That's not helpful for our kids, but saying something like, there are people out there who will like you for you. You might have to be alone. You might have to make the effort, but it's going to be worth it. And we're here to support you. Like that's one that has been really impactful for people.
That's a great one.
Another one is know yourself. And it says, when somebody asks you what you like, have an answer. There's no right answer, but instead of saying nothing or Netflix, figure out who you are and be able to say something confidently like, I love to play with Legos, or I'm really interested in movie making, or I love football, whatever that is. And there was the cutest experience. There was a mom who was doing this with her older teens, but her 6-year-old was obviously part of the conversation. And they were at the grocery store. And the checker asked her 6-year-old, what do you like to do? And he'd been thinking about it because he'd been part of the family night lesson. And he told this lady at the grocery store exactly what he liked to do. And as they walked out, he said, "Mom, I know myself." And I just
That's awesome.
loved it. Like, there's confidence that comes when you're able to answer somebody when they ask you who you are and what you like to do. And so that's really been my biggest motivator, is to help
That's
give
awesome.
our kids who are often, eyes down, headphones on, disconnected, help them find confidence to connect.
No, that's awesome. Let's talk about your book. I like myself anyway, right? So
I like me anyway.
I like me
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah, I got to use properly. Sorry. Edit that out. Sorry. Grammarly's not here to fix my speaking. I read that, the opening to it told about a story. You were feeling pretty good about your mothering.
Yeah.
And then you moved to a place where everyone's doing everything that we do, canning, whatever, shearing sheep and knitting wool, whatever else.
Yep.
And so then you started to feel like, well, maybe I'm not so good at it. So let's talk about that. What was the impetus for this book, and give us some insights?
Well, I think in motherhood, a lot of times it's really easy to fall into a perfectionist trap, looking around you and feeling like everyone is doing things so much better than you do them. And I had a lot of really interesting experiences, and I was 40 when I published the book, which for some might sound old and for others might sound young, somewhere right in the middle for me. But I realized that some of the experiences that I had really taught me a couple things. It taught me to be okay with imperfection, which is a huge lesson to learn in our lives, because when we do, we're able to have joy, even when times aren't perfect, which is the majority of our life.
Right.
It helped me to learn about connection. I'd had a lot of experiences that taught me about connection, and also taught me how to put Christ in the center of my life. And so those were the things that I wrote about. And I wanted to teach other women that, and actually a lot of men really like the book too, but I wanted to teach them that how to be okay with imperfection and how to use that to propel you to connection and get closer to Christ. There were a lot of times I felt really alone, like I was the only one who was going through things. And then as I shared on social media about something, there were floods of people who were going through it, and I thought I was alone. I thought everyone always felt super connected to God,
Right.
and it was like, oh no, I was struggling with this. Or I thought everyone's kids listened and did what they were supposed to, because no one ever talks about it when they don't.
Right.
And talked about how I worked through that and how I became secure as a mother because of what I was doing, not because who my kids were being. I thought that when you were righteous, you were monetarily blessed, right? If they're righteous, they'll prosper. And to hear about someone who was doing all the right things, and when things didn't work out financially, and then who are you? Who are you to yourself? Who are you to God? And can blessings come other ways? Can you prosper differently? And so those were some of the things that I thought were really important for me to share. And the feedback has been really, really wonderful. A lot of people who thought maybe they didn't belong, or that they were too different, or their testimony was too shaky to feel like they had a place in the gospel, or sometimes even with Jesus, realize that that's exactly where they should be, was in the gospel and with Jesus. So
I know you've been a part of Time Out for Women. I think one of the things you do talk about is making those type of connections. What are some of the key elements, that help us with that? I just think a lot of times we can go past people and never really connect with them. And maybe that has to do with our relationship with God as well. But what's been your discovery?
Well, there's a lot of, I think, first of all, realizing that sometimes people feel like everyone else has an easy time with it.
Sure.
But really, it's hard for most people to figure out how to open up and connect. And I think one of the key elements to that is opening up. In order to connect with somebody, you have to be real. It's hard to connect with somebody who says, I'm great. Yep, everything's good. No problems. Life's good. Where are you going to connect with someone like that? It's great to connect with over a happy time, but give me some information, give me some details. Tell me how you got to that happy time. And sometimes we have to connect through something that is difficult. When somebody says, how's it going? Mostly it's going really good, but I'm really struggling with figuring out how to balance motherhood and work. That's been a real struggle for me. And it's like, oh, really? Yeah, I've been working too. Like, what I found is I can do this, or I just get that. Like, if you figure out anything, let me know. Sometimes connecting with someone means not knowing everything. I have an example. So I have the most wonderful neighbor, and she seems to know everything about everything, right? She's a little older than I am, and she's so good at all the things. And I love, 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 and admire her so much. And she has this beautiful garden out front and beautiful flowers. And when I moved in, we did not have a beautiful front yard with beautiful flowers, but I really would have loved to have one. And I could have Googled things. I could have gone to the nursery and asked for all the tips. I could have hired somebody to help me figure it out. But instead, I decided to ask my neighbor if she would help me and tell me all about her flowers and which ones worked in shade and sun and which ones did well in our area. And we bonded so quickly over gardening. And we continue to bond over gardening and over a million other things now. But if I would have just stayed and wanted to be good at everything too, and didn't want to ask for help and didn't want to open up and I didn't want to take advice from anyone, and I just thought Google was my answer, I would have missed out on a really incredible friendship with my neighbor. So
be intentional, find people, make those connections.
mm-hmm.
I think it's really important, especially today with so many voices, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, you name it, there's 1,000 different apps, to have points of light, I guess put in George Bush's terms, right? Points of light where you can go and turn to find good things and like what you're doing. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I had an interesting experience in my life where I wasn't filling my life with bad things, but I was filling my life with a lot of noise. And instead of going toward light, I was spending most of my time, just kind of in information, just stuff. And I noticed very quickly that my testimony was getting a little shakier because I was putting so much faith in people that didn't deserve my faith. Oh. And in that time, I kept thinking, well, how come God isn't answering my prayers? How come he's not helping me know this or that? How come he isn't helping me feel part of this gospel? And when I realized he was trying, but I wasn't giving him any opportunities, because he can't help me feel light and goodness and joy about his gospel if most of my time is spent doing things that is questioning it, making me question my faith, making me so distracted that I don't have time for him. He wasn't pulling away from me at all. I was just choosing not to have him in my life. And when I cut the things off that were noise, and especially the things that were making me question my faith, and spent that time instead nurturing my faith, it was almost immediate that the light came back into my life in full force. And so many questions that I was having were answered by a podcast that I listened to, or by a scripture that I'd read, or by a conference talk that I'd been willing to engage in, or even by someone who shares a lot of light on social media. I wasn't seeing their posts because I was so worried about the other things that were taking me away. Gotcha. And so I think there's such power in where we spend our time. And so important to remember that God is never saying, I'm not interested in you. We're always saying, we're not interested in him. And as hard as he tries and as much as he can do, because I do believe he's fighting for us all of the time, even when I wasn't willing to spend time with him, I would hear something at church, or my husband would send a quote, and he was trying to get in. He was fighting for me. He was fighting for who he knew I could be. And while he's doing that, unless we open up our hearts and our time and our life to him, he's not going to be able to get fully in. And there's a huge change in the way we feel. I remember, looking back on that time, I felt a lot of angst. I felt bothered a lot. I felt a lot of fear and a lot of worry. And when I shut those things down, there were times I still felt fear, worry, and angst, but I had so much peace that would overpower that.
Great insights, man. Thanks for sharing that. Brooke Romney Writes. You look it up, do a Google. You'll find it there on Instagram, website, and check out the books, 52 Modern Manners for Today's Teens, version 1 and 2. Yep. And also, I Like Me.
You were probably right with grammar, but I just liked the title better. So
I'm pretty sure you were right with grammar. Anyway, so great to have you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian.